Right, we're back with another episode. AP, how you doing, my friend?
Very well, thanks, Darren. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I thought I'd start off this episode by just giving a shout out to our first sponsor, Bruce Jack Wine. They've sent over some bottles of wine for us to try. So that was pretty awesome of them to do that. Yeah, he was just like, look, if we can collaborate on something, why not? And I thought, yeah, let's give it a go. So I just wanted to say this video was sponsored by Bruce Jack. Thank you so much for that. And I guess, yeah, drink responsibly. I've not had a sponsor, so let's see how it goes. But no time to waste. Absolutely insane weekend of rugby again. We are very structured this week. We do need to sort of address the elephant in the room, as you like to say. And that, of course, is the whole Jake Ball saga. Now, as you love to do, give us a bit of context quickly on the story. And yeah, we are going to give our responses.
Well, I put my foot in it again this week because on our last week's podcast, I said I'd be amazed if this guy isn't cited. The fallout from our last podcast is quite entertaining. Shout out to Wales Online, who are clearly avid watchers of the show because they, us two chatting in our bedrooms about rugby is now being dubbed the South African media. So they ran a headline saying the South African media slams Jake Ball for horrific tackle or whatever, which is quite entertaining. But yeah, so this is now a little bit old news, but Jake Ball sort of came around the ruck and put a shoulder to Faf de Klerk's head 2 weeks ago, well, sort of a week ago now in the Champions Cup. He wasn't cited for it, wasn't red carded. It was a pretty terrible decision. But yeah, I think that there's not much more which needs to be said in it. I think we covered most of it last time round. As I said, it's a bit old news at this point. Having said that, it was good to see that actually a lot of Welsh fans as well came out and condemned the fact that he wasn't cited. And it does make me sort of think sometimes, what are the citing commissioners doing? Because I'm pretty shocked he got away with it. But anyway, that's rugby, that's life. Sometimes people get away with things. And, I guess Faf de Klerk didn't have a great game. Sale didn't have a great game this week. So swings and roundabouts. One day you're pumping Scarlets. The next week you're getting absolutely smashed by La Rochelle. But yeah, just a quick word on that one. And that's, I guess, just the pickup from last week.
It's safe to say, we have nothing personal against Jake Ball. So, yeah, Wales Online, thank you for the shout out. We absolutely appreciate, that you guys are listening and watching the show. So I guess we were taking some sort of negative reinforcement and turning it into a positive one. But regardless of that being said, that's done and dusted. That's in the past. No point crying about it because we're just wasting precious time on that. Right. You've got some information, or you want to tell us a bit about Hamish Watson? What's going on there?
Yeah, so just to quickly run through some of the news stories coming out this week. The Hamish Watson one is an interesting one to me. Stephen Jones wrote an article this week, effectively saying Hamish Watson, who is voted Six Nations Player of the Tournament, we've talked about him previously as being, in my mind at least, a certain starter on the open side for the Lions. Him sort of Curry going head to head for that position. But anyway, Stephen Jones wrote an article saying that Hamish Watson was not big enough to front South Africa, which I find laughable, to be honest with you. And I think he got a lot of backlash for it, and I think rightly so, because ultimately, anybody who's watched Hamish Watson plays knows he's, yes, he's not in stature-wise the biggest guy, but he generates an enormous amount of power just through his speed and strength and contact. He's absolutely big enough to front South Africa. But for me, the interesting thing about this isn't so much even the debate, but more the fact that it's being had. So the fact that people are already worrying about whether someone's big enough to face South Africa, it just suggests to me, seeing Jacques and South Africa living rent free in these guys' heads. There's no other side in the world where this would be the conversation being had. So I just find that a little bit interesting. Briefly to touch upon the Hamish Watson thing from a South African's perspective, or at least my perspective, he's absolutely big enough to front South Africa. It's nonsense to say he's not.
Yeah, I agree with you there. He's absolutely big enough and he's absolutely ready. And he's probably going to be one of the biggest threats to the Springboks. I mean, so I don't know what they're on about there. That's not the only issue the Lions have at the moment, is it? I mean, they seem to be having a problem with their coaching. And what have you found out about that this week?
Yeah, so that's the other sort of big news story that's come out this week is about the Lions coaching side, or Gatland's coaching team. Previously, it was suggested that he was building this, world-beating coaching side, which would have Andy Farrell, so that's Ireland's head coach, former defensive coach, who would be running the defense. That's now fallen through because Ireland have scheduled or are looking to schedule a tour to the Pacific Islands this summer, UK-based summer. And he feels that in his responsibility as head coach of Ireland, he owes it to them to be on that tour. So that's why he's stepped down. Graham Roundtree, who's at Munster at the moment, he was due to be forwards coach. Not sure whether that's going to go ahead. So the two dead certs that we know that who's going to run the attack and who's going to run the defence, and they're both Scottish coaches. So Gregor Townsend, was a fantastic player, did South Africa a world of harm in the Lions Series 97, and has been great as a coach for Scotland. He's going to run the attack, which I think is a very shrewd appointment. And then the Scotland defensive coach is a guy called Steve Tandy, and he's been absolutely superb. So he's actually a Welsh guy. He played for the Ospreys, so many times. I can't remember how many caps he's got for them, but, I think it's close to 100 or maybe over 100 caps for the Ospreys. Coached for the Ospreys for a long time. Briefly did a stint at the Waratahs and then was snapped up by Scotland, which is his first international coaching gig. But he's been a revelation. Scotland had one of the best defenses in the Six Nations. His name isn't mentioned enough in terms of the great defensive coaches. A guy like Sean Edwards, who's brilliant, but everyone talks about Sean Edwards. He's been fantastic with France and formerly with Wales. But Steve Tandy is another one of those guys, hard-nosed Welsh guy, runs defense, brutally well. And I think he's a very shrewd appointment. So whatever team Gatland brings over in terms of the coaching setup, there'll be a handful. But having said that, not having a guy like Andy Farrell involved is probably a bit of a blow.
Yeah, I mean, Tandy's got a great record. You mentioned it earlier there. He was at the Ospreys. He coached with Gatland at the Ospreys. And I mean, Scotland did have one of the best records. I think I saw somewhere that they had some of the fewest points against them in the whole tournament. So, there's definitely something working there in a defensive aspect. Some of the other guys that I saw were mentioned, someone like who was a Robin McBride also could possibly be a favorite as forwards coach. Who else? Steve Borthwick. I mean, the Leicester coach, he was also an option, but then turned that down due to the schedule that they were going to have. I think he was saying something like, it's going to clash too much with the Tigers, and that he was going to miss some of the preparation games or preseason. So he wasn't interested. And of course, some of the others that you mentioned. And now, is this something that the Springboks need to be worried about or concerned about, that the Lions are having issues with their coaching? Is it going to affect their game plan in any way? What do you think? Or is it not something they need to worry about, that they just need to focus on their own setup?
I think there's plenty enough for Jacques Ninoba and Rassie Erasmus to be worrying about in their own camp at the moment. And we'll definitely come on to talking about the whole Rainbow Cup preparation on the shambles. But I don't think they'll be worried. As I said, I think that whoever Gatland brings is going to be top quality. There's no lack of good coaching in the Northern Hemisphere, and his coaching setup will have a very strong vision, will have very, very clear ideas. And I think there'll be a handful, whoever he brings. So I think that we'll not see a noticeable weakness in any coaching setup in the Lions at all.
And it's only going to benefit Scotland because, I mean, they've only ever picked 3 Scottish players since you mentioned the 1997 series. And we could potentially see more Scottish players in the side now. And it's only a good thing. And it's quite clearly showing that Scottish rugby is finally heading in the direction that a lot of us have been waiting for. And it's good to see, but yeah, again, it adds to the anticipation and the excitement of the tournament, bar all the other things that are sort of hindering it and delaying it. But I mean, it's good to see. I mean, Gatland is obviously a very knowledgeable man. He's very successful, and, it should, pose for such a great, intense, quality part of the game. So yeah, let's wait and see. We're going to be talking about Japan. So let's quickly discuss the Japanese national team that got released today. Was it a 53-man squad?
So it's the wider training squad has been released.
Now, what is a wider training squad?
So usually what happens is that you release your preliminary training squad, which is, it's anywhere from 40 players upwards. 52 is quite a lot, but you basically get everyone into a big squad, and then you sort of thin it down over a number of weeks. It depends how much preparation time you have. It depends how much access you have to your players. That is sort of often dictated by franchise interests or club interests, union interests. So not all international coaches have that luxury. But yeah, in Japan's case anyway, Jamie Joseph has named his 52-man wider training squad. And just from a South African perspective, I mean, two guys are in there who we know and love. So we've got Gerard van den Heever, who, I mean, he's an interesting one for me because when he first came onto the scene at the Bulls, I think a lot of people, myself included, were saying this guy is going to be the next big thing. He had absolutely everything. He is 6'3", big guy, but he's unbelievably quick. Had a great kicking game, very long boot, as so many South Africans do. Solid, sturdy defense. It seemed that he ticked all the boxes and was very successful at the Bulls. Was sort of seen as the natural successor to Brian Obano, who was looking to move to the Stormers at that time. So it seemed to me that his career would be just going up and up and up. He played junior rugby for South Africa, but something just didn't work for him. I don't really know the story well enough. It always baffles me why it didn't really come off for him. It didn't really work at the Bulls. He went to the Stormers, then went to Munster, ended up in Japan. I'm really glad to see him in the squad, though. I think that it'd be very good for him if he got an international cap somewhere, because I think he's absolutely deserving. He's a brilliant player. I've seen him play a lot for the in Super Rugby with the Sunwolves, and he was always a standout on the wing there. So yeah, I'm very happy for him. And the other guy is obviously Shane Gates, who you actually alerted me to, and I believe he was at the Kings previously as well, and is now playing his trade in Japan. And congratulations to him as well being called up.
Yeah, it's great to see. I mean, obviously it's a loss for South African rugby, but with the amount of talent we keep mentioning, it can be quite difficult, and it's a choice that some of these guys have to make, from a younger age than usual. And yeah, good luck to both of them. They join a few other South African-born players in the squad too. And I've been keeping an eye on Gerard like the last 6 or 7 weeks now that the Japanese league has been going on for, and he's doing really well at Kubota. And he's got a really good boot too. So I've not seen anything of him before that, but from what I've seen so far this year, he's actually pretty good. And he's got to be mentioned. And I guess that's our job here, isn't it? To sort of highlight the guys that we think might be doing really well at their current clubs, who are options for the Springboks or other national sides. But yeah, like good luck to him. And again, as usual, we'll keep an eye on all of these guys and keep everybody posted with what's been going on. If anybody out there knows a lot more than we do about any of these players, then yeah, just make sure you leave a comment or anything in the comment section below and just let us know, like what you think of them. Have you played with them before? I read a quick tweet earlier of a guy saying that he played with Shane Gates, and he's just a monster of a player. So it's exciting for us, because we get to talk about it. But yeah, things have been going well again for us in Japan. Our players are they're unstoppable, man. I mean, I'm going to start with probably the biggest impact player in South African rugby, in my opinion, Malcolm Marx, who scored his 7th and 8th try again this weekend. But a little bit different this time, because how we absolutely love to get a ball from the line out, and we do that rolling maul, and that classic Springbok train, reaches the try line. But this time round, neither of those tries were like that. He sort of made himself available as the ball came out from the scrum half. He went and stood right where the center should be standing, where Damien Dielende should be standing. And, you make yourself available, and you are someone the size of Malcolm Marx, you're going to probably break a defense 5 meters out. And that's exactly what he did. 2 quality tries from Malcolm again this weekend. And in the same game, what drama. I don't know if you watched any of it or caught some of the highlights, but I mean, yeah, final seconds of the game, they were well into the 80th minute. Kubota were down. Toyota were down against Kubota. And then what was it? Who was it? Yokosuke Takayashi gets a break on the right-hand side and scores a try. But the game wasn't done there. Lionel Cronier had a mammoth job to do. We know how impressive he's been all season with Toyota. And of course, in the coolest, calmest fashion, places the ball, sets it up nicely. And it was like nothing, it was like bread and butter for him, scores the conversion, and they win the game by 1 point. So that was awesome to see. It was awesome for the Japanese fans to see, that sort of intensity and how important some of these kicks are going to become, or these moments in the games are going to become, But yeah, he's already on 74 points for the season. I mean, 7 games in, 74 points. He's got to try himself. He's doing a phenomenal job with the boot. And I wanted to ask the question. I don't know how long I had to wait to ask the question, but I mean, is there any Springbok opportunity there for Lionel Cronier, or is that just wishful thinking?
Yes, it's difficult. We've spoken about this very briefly before, and we said, I'm going to scupper myself whatever I say here now. He's been fantastic. I don't want to say too much more. I think that it'll be very, very difficult for him to get into a Springbok setup. I think with Pollard, Jantjies, Kerwin Bosch is probably seen as the third choice. It would be very difficult for him to make it back into it. In my opinion, yeah, that's. I don't think it's likely. Having said that, though, stranger things have happened. I'm sure that the Springbok coaches will be watching him, as you say, completely dominating in Japan. He's been brilliant, not just from the boot. I think he's had great control in the games that I've seen him play. He's always been a very good distributing fly off as well. Even I remember from his Kings days, he's always a bit of a ball player. So I think that credit, power to him. Who knows? Maybe. I think it'd be very difficult, but stranger things have happened. So let's see.
Yeah, absolutely. SB Murray had probably one of the best games of the whole weekend. He managed to bag 4 tries in one game. I'm busy working on a SB Murray highlights package video right now, and man, the guy was just everywhere. Again, I mentioned it with Malcolm Marks. If you make yourself available for the ball, there's some great individual tactics from him. The team set up a lot of training day training day gameplays. But yeah, they were all over the show. They eventually won 71-24, and he was phenomenal again. SB Murray, is this someone that we should be looking at, or what do you reckon?
It's an interesting one because I think that he's another one of those who's very, very unlucky not to have made Springbok. In 2016, when Alistair Coetzee took over and he named his first Boks squad, there was sort of a 50-50 at that time between SP and Andries Coetzee, who was at the Lions at the time. And it ended up being Andries Coetzee who came into the squad and played a couple caps for South Africa, and he was a decent player for them. And I like him. He offers a lot, but he's either way. But it was interesting because it really could have gone either way. I think SP Murray is one of those guys who's a bit more creative. He's he's an attacking threat, as we've seen. And he's another guy a bit like Dylan Lates, who ironically both from the Stormers, who are just, they're excellent players who are sort of on this fringe Bok radar. I think that I have to say again, I think playing in Japan, unless you're already a certified Springbok dead starter, it's difficult for you to break into the Springbok squad playing in Japan, unless you're already there. So I'm not sure that we'll see him in a Boks squad. The other thing is just at the moment, the back three for South Africa in the backline is the most congested I think it's ever been. You've got a guy like Apolele Fassi coming through. You've got Damian Willemse, who's now probably going to be sticking at 15. You've got Willie Leroux still there and also doing exceedingly well in Japan. You've got Colby on the wing. Mapimpi is doing well in Japan. Sabun Corsi, who's tearing it up. And a lot of these guys can play different positions in the back three. So I think at the moment, trying to break into a Springbok back three is very difficult. But having said that, 4 tries in a game is always a lot of fun. Jesse Creel scored a really good try in that game as well. Another guy who can cover 15. So who knows? But it's just great to see the boys tearing up. It was a fun game to watch. I didn't watch the whole thing, I have to admit. But watching the highlights was like watching the whole game because it was, a try every minute almost.
Yeah. they scored. I think they scored every 3 minutes. They scored a try, and it was fun to watch. It was a great game to see. And yeah, Jesse was doing what he does best. And ultimately, guys who aren't, lucky enough to make the Springbok side or to make selection are doing South African rugby justice in Japan. So, it's not a bad story at the end of the day, but it is, it kind of sucks that you can't have all these players playing in the squad. If we could have a squad of like 100, that would be pretty awesome. But I mean, that being said, it's, if they can go apply their trade somewhere else and do well and, really make the country of South Africa proud, then why not, Just quickly, a couple of updates from Major League Rugby before we move on to the biggest part of the weekend, which was European rugby. Joe Peterson and Bjorn Basson both scored in their 34-32 defeat to the Houston Sabercats. I mean, those teams in Texas are ridiculous at the moment. They're tough to beat. We spoke about it quickly last time and the time before. Seattle, probably the top-notch favorite to win the whole thing, are actually right at the bottom, but we're not going to get into that right now. So yeah, the LA Guiltinis, they're right at the top with 15 points just after 3, and then Austin Gilgronis are 12 points after 4. So week in, week out, our Saffas are doing a great job over there. And I'm pretty sure there's more to come, but I will try and dedicate an episode to Major League Rugby if we can. Maybe perhaps when there isn't so much going on with the Lions and the Springboks and European rugby. But I mean, we will obviously try and get to every league as much as we can. So yeah, great to see. Now let's move on to European rugby. What a massive weekend. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, it was fantastic. The Champions Cup, Heineken Cup, which is obviously the premier, I guess, tournament in European rugby. That was fantastic. It was 2 days in the quarterfinals, quite conflicting quarterfinal days, I must admit. Saturday's games were a fair bit more exciting than Sunday's games. Who would have thought, with 4 French teams playing on Sunday, that there would be 0 tries and 160 minutes of rugby? There you go. But yeah, briefly, let's talk about the game of the weekend, really, for me, which was Leinster and Exeter. I played at Sandy Park.
Okay.
So not that many Saffas involved, unfortunately, but just a shout out, because I think Leinster are real championship quality. Hey, I think that I said last week Exeter have taken a bit of a step back this year. They made, in the sort of opening exchanges when they went 14 points up, I thought, oh wow, I'm going to look like a right idiot. But it just shows the character that Leinster have, that they came back and just completely took ascendancy that game. The last 20 minutes, they were just all over them. I think Exeter, the telling moment for me was in the last sort of 15 minutes of the game. Exeter they did their classic attempt to score from 5 meters out. They're the best in the world, in the club scene anyway, probably at doing it. And Leinster's defense was just monumental. They kept them out, forced them back to the 22, forced them back to the halfway line. The much vaunted Sam Simmons at 8. Robbie Henshaw was all over him like a rash. There was a period of play of about 5 minutes where Simmons carried 3 times and was just stopped dead in his tracks by Henshaw. I've said it before, I've said it many times, Henshaw is your starting 12 for the Lions. Anybody's welcome to disagree with me. They're wrong, I'm afraid to say. Henshaw was unbelievable. Hugo Keenan, who we've spoken about before, at 15 played a very good game, outplayed Stuart Hogg, who I think many people tipped to be a Lions starter and probably will be. But he was great at 15. That Leinster side is real quality, and they're playing La Rochelle, who are the other absolutely dominant team, and we'll talk a bit about them now. But that game in the semi-final, next time they play is going to be outstanding. But just quickly on the La Rochelle one, I'd like to get your input as well. Obviously, I feel quite smug. I don't know if you saw, but I wrote an article this week after our chat about Raymond Rule and Dylan Lades. I wrote an article on Raymond Rule and how well he's doing for La Rochelle there, and how he's taken up the outside centre berth so well. He was actually on the wing on the weekend, ironically enough, but he was man of the match. What an absolutely star performance. He scored 2 tries. His first try was just brilliant. Nice set piece move, overload the back of the line out, off the top, lovely inside ball, and then just to finish from there. He had a lot of work to do to dummy. I think it was Byron McGuigan, another Namibian sort of Saffa, and then go under the post. So his first try was brilliant, and then he showed a lot of skills on the second one as well. It was sort of a controlled chip through from a poorly fielded cross kick, which he then dotted down, showed good pace, and he was all over the show all game in the best possible way. He cut some really good lines. Dylan Lates on the other wing was also equally fantastic. The two combined actually for a really good defensive effort when Sale was sort of still in the game, which wasn't long because they were completely outplayed. But there was a time sort of early on in the game where it looked like Sale were going to make this brilliant break, and it was a lovely cover back tackle from Rule, sort of tip tackle that stopped it, and then Dylan Lates killed the momentum by winning what would have been a turnover, but they went back for advantage. But either way, those two are superb. La Rochelle, wow, they were so much fun to watch. They're just tearing it up. The pack dominated Sale. For all the talk about how fantastic, their backline is, the La Rochelle pack just took Sale to the cleaners, which, is not a lot of sides do that. We said last week that Sale would have really fronted up, but they didn't really look like they pitched up at the races. I think it was probably the worst Sale performance I've seen under Alex Anderson. It's a tough one. They'll learn a lot from it, but they just weren't really in it, I think. Faf de Klerk had an uncharacteristically poor game. He looked frustrated. He looked like he wasn't really, he wasn't his usual incisive self. Jean-Luc Dupré and Dan Dupré are usually so dominant. Guibas Visa as well. They didn't have the same impact that we're used to. Arca van der Merwe is another one who I rate so highly. I've said it time and again, but he wasn't as effectual as he usually is. So Sale unfortunately got caught out a bit, I think. That's why I say that's rugby for you. Week's a long time in rugby. One day you're pumping Scarlets, you look like the best team in the world. The next week you're getting shredded by La Rochelle. But yeah, that was a fantastic game. The extra Leinster game was fantastic. And then truthfully, the less said about the next two games, the better, if I'm honest with you. I had the misfortune of having to cover them. Wowee, the Bordeaux game. Yes, Bordeaux against Racing. Racing missing a few of their key players, I think. Virumi Vakatawa, they missed him quite a lot. Finn Russell, they missed. But even so, it was really poor. It just looked lethargic, just looked slow and poor skills and little intent. Jalibert was probably the standout in that game, Mathieu Jalibert, and he probably hasn't done his chances of taking the starting jersey away from Romain Ntamak any harm, because he was the only standout. Joseph Dweber came on as well, talking about the Saffas involved. He came on, he showed a little bit of impetus. He was good, but on the whole, poor game. And the same can be said really of the next one as well. So not too great French derbies to finish, but on the whole, a very good weekend of Champions Cup rugby.
Yeah, I mean it's well said. I didn't catch much of the Exeter Leinster game. I was traveling. But it sounds like it was one of the best games of the weekend, as you say. I did have the very unfortunate, chance to watch La Rochelle versus Sale, because it's a tough one for me because I support Sale, and you wanted them to sort of go there and prove everybody wrong. You wanted to sort of still be on that bus where Alex Sanderson is taking them to new heights, and you wanted to prove everybody wrong, but ultimately, they were outplayed. It was a very tough first half. I don't know what was said to La Rochelle at halftime. I don't know if Ronan O'Gara, was whipping them or not, but I think they listened very quickly. And, the minute they came back out second half, two quick Raymond Rule tries, and that was just it. The first try, again, as we say, a very well-worked set-piece try, manages to get through, does a little shimmy, quick look and step, and there he's gone, and I mean, it was absolutely fantastic to see a player that we keep bringing up, but I mean, he's just doing it himself, and Raymond Rule was just doing a phenomenal job at La Rochelle, and that first try proved that, something they've been working on, and he was obviously clearly the guy, to put in the right place at the right time. Second try again, I mean, it took me back to the 2010 FIFA World Cup when Shabalala just booted that ball past Perez, I think was in goal. But yeah, again, Hammersley with a terrible mistake. I don't know if there was shock horror in the moment or if he just hesitated. I mean, he hesitated, and on the most awkward bouncing ball, it is as some people like to call it, an oddball sport, but I mean, it does bring a lot of intensity and responsibility. Yeah, but I don't know what happened there. It was very, foolproof. But one guy that was there, Raymond Rule, he pounced very quickly with an incredible amount of skill, sort of in the air, boots the ball past Hamish. He beats him to the line and then, scores the try. And then and there, it was done and dusted. All week we've been talking about, or Sale fans have been talking about the strength and endurance of the Sale pack, those big Saffa lads. But I think La Rochelle did their homework well, or it was a combination of them doing their homework well, a combination of their forwards just outpowering the Sale pack, their backline just doing what they do best. Our Saffas switching on for them again. Dylan, quick thinking, sort of again. I don't want to be that Sale fan and say, but it was a little bit of a knock on. You could stand here for hours talking about that. I don't think it was. Again, quick thinking, picks up the ball and absolutely gassed his way to the line with a cheeky little smile just before crossing the line, which is always great to see. Raymond Rule, again, we need to sort of mention, I don't know, I'm not liking what I'm seeing too much regarding one of these aspects of his game, which is the tackling. I'm hoping we can sort of quickly go through that. But yeah, they outplayed Sale. They did a great job. And now I'm hoping they go and win the whole thing. Bordeaux, I did watch that game. Again, I probably had I would have had a better experience watching paint dry, but it, Curtly Beale, what was he doing for Racing? I mean, they just didn't have it in them. They didn't want to play. And, sometimes you get those games. You could say it was the conditions. You can say it was a whole bunch of things. But I mean, Matthew Jalibert was class. He was concise. He went to do a job and he did it really well. And as you said, he's definitely put himself up for first choice. But yeah, the last game I didn't see much of. As I said, I was traveling and I was traveling within reason. So for those who think, oh my God, why are you traveling through COVID? It was all done responsibly and all taken care of the right way. But yeah, an insane weekend of European rugby. I think, it's set up a really nice semi-final for each of our teams that are left in it. Again, the probability of someone French winning it is probably a lot higher than we think. But yeah, if you ask me right now who I think it was between, I'm quite sad that it's not actually going to be the final. But yeah, if it's either going to be between La Rochelle or Leinster, I think they look, from the Leinster game, from the highlights, they were just patient. They were clinical when they needed to be. They were sharp when they needed to be, and they just went and do what Leinster do best. And again, La Rochelle, they're very difficult to beat in the Bay of Biscay. So yeah, it's either going to be one of those two teams for me. I can't see, the others. Potentially, Toulouse might, DuPont, you can't
switch it on.
Colby,
Toulouse, yeah.
But genuinely,
yeah,
I don't know. Well, let's make our picks then, or is it too early to say? Shall we wait? Actually, no.
Oh, yeah, let's make our picks. I'm going to say I think Leinster are going to do a job. I think they're going to squeak past La Rochelle. They're going to play Toulouse in the final. Toulouse are going to turn it on against Bordeaux. I could be completely wrong. I suspect we're going to see a Leinster versus Toulouse final, which I think on the balance of the whole season are probably the two best sides in Europe. And then it's anyone's game. It's very difficult to call that one. But I think that'll be our final. And then I think, I'm going to say Leinster. I think Leinster just have that clinical edge. I don't know. I've got a feeling.
Okay. That's the rugby knowledge talking there. Mine's more of like a Saffa bias. I think that La Rochelle, will just turn up again. I'm hoping that we see a lot more fireworks from our boys, obviously, but I'm going to go La Rochelle Toulouse final and Colby to score the winning try to make us reminisce about that 2019 World Cup final. But yeah, I'm still down about the wholesale thing. I'm not going to lie. So I really don't know. I don't care who wins, but like, yeah, Stade Rochelle, Stade Toulousain final, and Colby to score the winner.
Okay, brilliant. Not jot it down.
And then neither of us, get our way, and then Joseph Dweeber comes and scores a hat trick in the final.
Yeah, literally. Bordeaux Clinton.
We've got a bit of an issue in Europe, not so much in the Heineken Champions Cup or the Challenge Cup rugby, but I'm talking this whole Rainbow Cup thing. I made an error earlier on Twitter, but that's done and dusted now. But what is happening? Apparently, the South African franchises, they cannot come here because of a visa issue. The British government are not going to issue them visas. So you're the right person to do this. So can you just tell us from the beginning, what was the plan, what's happening now, and how are we going to fix this?
Yeah, I think it's important to give a little bit of background context to this, just to try and understand what's quite a tricky issue, particularly if we've got South African listeners and European listeners and just how it all interplays. So obviously the Rainbow Cup is a competition which is the precursor to the Pro 16 next season, which South Africa is meant to start playing in 2 weeks' time. The competition kicks off. It runs until June. It's quite, it's an intro to basically the South African teams coming to Europe. So the way that this was going to work is for the first 3 rounds of that competition, starting in 2 weeks' time, the South African teams were going to be based in South Africa playing local derbies. And I think it was the same with the Irish teams and same with the Welsh teams. It was local derbies to start the competition. And then any travel would be minimized and done later in the competition. So 3 rounds in South Africa for the South African teams, after which they, in the interest of minimizing travel, would base themselves in Europe and play all their games in Europe. So they wouldn't have home games. They just said, it's fine, we'll base ourselves in Europe. That's cool. So the plan was that they would base themselves, all 4 teams, in one location, again, to minimize, you only need one small bio bubble in Bristol, in England, southwest England. So that was the plan. And that's been sort of the plan for a while now, and it's sort of been accepted. And that seemed all hunky-dory. And then the news broke that South African teams, on the advice of the British government, had been told not to apply for visas, and that the British government had made a decision that they would not allow the South African teams to travel to the UK on the basis of coronavirus concerns, probably because of the South African variant. I think that's something that we understand, being here in the UK, is a big concern for the government. But this throws a lot of spanners in the works. For me, it seems odd that there wouldn't be a contingency plan, that the Pro 14 organizers and SA Rugby didn't have a plan, to counteract this eventuality. And to me, the only reason I can think why they didn't have one is because they were given a government assurance, which has now been reversed. Be that as it may, that's speculation. I don't know. All that we know for sure is that the South African teams were last Friday told not to make visa applications. The UK government had decided not to issue them visas. They weren't allowed to travel to the UK. They weren't allowed to base themselves in Bristol. Where it gets a little bit complicated is that the UK is obviously made up of England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. We'll leave Northern Ireland out of this for the purposes of this because it's Ulster is Northern Ireland, but it's governed by the Irish Rugby Football Union. Either way. So despite the fact that England doesn't have any teams in the Pro 14, and despite the fact that Wales or Scotland might be very willing to host South African teams in a bio bubble there, as opposed to one in Bristol, which is in England, the thing is that the devolved assemblies of Wales and Scotland, they don't have the right to issue visas. That's something that only the UK government, which is based in Westminster in England, can do. So that's just a clarification there about how the devolved assemblies fit in all of this. So there's 2 issues here, which is one is the right to travel to the UK and granting visas, and the second one is where to be based. And it looks like it seems unlikely that the UK government is going to budge on this, which is unfortunate. So now there are a number of eventualities. Where do we go from here? What is the fallout? What is the contingencies? The most likely, and unfortunately I don't think it is very likely, but the most likely alternative is to base themselves in Ireland, which is a different government, obviously, and try and do it that way. Now, Ireland has recently also introduced mandatory quarantining periods and elite sport isn't exempt from that, unfortunately. So the Irish Rugby Football Union is currently lobbying or putting pressure on the Irish government to reverse that decision. Previously, the Irish football equivalent had tried to do the same thing but didn't get much purchase. So it doesn't seem likely that they'll be successful, but they might be. They might be successful, and the Boks might base themselves or look to base themselves in Dublin, probably, and to have their bio bubble there, and then play their games and go and travel. No one can say how likely that is. All I can say is that I know from SA Rugby's perspective that they didn't pull out of their own volition. This was something which was blocked by the British government. And I know that they'll be exploring every single option. And I'll tell you why they'll be exploring every single option. Because of it, I mean, money makes the world go round in professional sport. I don't think there's a country in the world, at least in rugby terms, that has been more impacted by COVID than South Africa, financially and otherwise. South Africa's really gotten a raw deal out of it, particularly with the Lions series and everything involved. So given that South Africa was dumped out of Super Rugby basically by New Zealand and Australia, they've missed out on a lot of revenue there. This is the big money spinner. The Pro 16 and the Rainbow Cup is a big money spinner. We can't say exactly how much the broadcast revenue is predicted to be, but we know it's in the millions of pounds, probably, which is tens of millions of rand. So SA Rugby's finances are very stretched at the moment as it is. Earlier last year, actually, there were across the board pay cuts, player salaries, coaches, in an attempt to save people's jobs. It's really unpleasant. And so if the Rainbow Cup doesn't go ahead, the fallout we can expect is that we're going to see more of the same in terms of SA Rugby being stretched financially with all the associated fallout. Maybe even player wages being cut, maybe even management cuts, maybe even players released from contracts. It'll be messy, which we don't want to see. And longer term, it would be catastrophic because obviously player wages get cut. That's one more reason why a South African player might seek an overseas contract. That undermines the strength of the teams further. So the long-term impacts of not playing this Rainbow Cup are astronomical for South Africa. And also on the flip side, it's very, very bad news for all the Irish rugby teams, the Welsh franchises, the Scottish ones, and the Italian ones as well. They also stand to lose a hell of a lot from broadcast revenue. All those sides have been bailed out, or their unions have been bailed out by their governments over COVID. So they might have to go to the government again. Whether they get a bailout again, who knows? But again, it's not a situation they want to find themselves in. They also stand to make a massive loss. So there's no stakeholders here who benefit from this. The only reason it's happening is because the UK government is concerned about COVID. So I don't know. I think it's very difficult to say what's going to happen from here. I seriously hope it doesn't get cancelled. My gut feeling is that maybe it is, unfortunately, but my hope is that they can find some workaround. Pro 14 organisers, SA Rugby, whoever, find some workaround, whether with the Irish government or the British government or even the Italian government, just so that this thing can be played in some form, in some capacity, and they need to find some compromise because the amount that everyone is set to lose if it doesn't is, well, I've said it before, I think it's catastrophic. And that's just from a financial and long-term perspective, where that's before we even talk about the impact it will have on South Africa's preparation for the Lions series. This was supposed to be, we're going to play the players now that you're likely to play against in the Lions series. This is a chance for Rossi and Jacques to get a sense of where our players are in relation to international quality opposition. It'll bugger up their plans for preparing for the Lions series massively if it doesn't go ahead. So it would be a travesty, a real travesty if it gets cancelled. And it's my sincere hope that it doesn't.
Yeah, and we haven't got long because I think it's only a week or so away now before this tournament even kicks off. So who knows if we can somehow get a couple of local derbies in each respective country going, just so that the South African teams are not left out of this tournament, as you said, and given an excellent, reason why they need to be part of the series. So fingers crossed this goes ahead. And obviously we will also do our very best to keep everybody updated on all the developments and such. Let's get into some transfer and rumor news, and then we'll talk about our who we think was the Saffa standout of the week or Saffa player of the week. And yeah, so I've only sort of seen half of this, so we can maybe discuss 50-50. I saw Jaco Coetzee finally made it to Bath. He was waiting ages for his visa to clear. I think the same thing happened to Jacques du Toit. But ultimately, he's at Bath, and it's so great to see. Bath posted a video of him at the training ground and just sort of introducing his sentiments on finally arriving at the club. So are Bath up to something? They're signing some really good players. They've got a really, in my opinion, I don't know what people think of him in South Africa. So I'd like to get your opinion on that. He's not a Saffa, but I'd still like to get your opinion. Danny Cipriani, I think for me, genuinely, he's one of the best players in the world. Obviously, a lot of bad publicity in his career, a lot of nonsense on the field, on and off the field. But when it comes to the game itself, he's a genuinely great addition to Bath. They're signing some ridiculous South African talent, as we know. Tian got injured, which it's really sad to see. I don't know how long he's going to be out. I suspect maybe for a while. So that's not the greatest. But what are Bath up to? Like, what's happening over there?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, just to touch on Jaco Coetzee, he's an outstanding player. I think Bath fans don't quite realize how good he is at the moment. I picked him a while ago as being a Lions bolter. I think, unfortunately, that ship has sailed. But having said that, I think I'll pick him to make a similar type of impact that Jasper Wiese has made at Tigers. This guy is phenomenal. He can play any position in the back row. Number 8 is probably where he stands out, but he's very versatile. He's an outstanding ball carrier, line-out option. I think he's just an all-round, really, really good player. And I think one of the biggest losses for the Stormers as well, and for Western Province. So no, I think he's fantastic. I really, really do. And then touching on your point about Danny Cipriani, obviously, I don't know what, I think the wheels came off a bit for him at Gloucester. He was outstanding there, and now he's moving. I mean, unfortunately, as we know, he's hopped around clubs a fair bit. He has this, he's an absolute maverick, fantastic player. I think they've been struggling for a while. They've got Reece Priestland at Bath. Tian Skuman's obviously come over, but obviously he's injured at the moment. So they are struggling a bit in that 10 position and trying to find a long-term answer there. I don't know if Cipriani is a long-term answer because he is sort of reaching the twilight of his career, but what he'll definitely bring is he'll give you, your attack will be probably revolutionized by him. He runs a backline like few other people can. He is real box office. So no, I think he'll fit in there. I think Bath's one of those sides who are very inconsistent. They can be great one day and awful the next. And I think just finding that consistency going forward will be key for them. I mean, a big loss to them is obviously Zach Mercer, who's going off to France. I think that's probably why Coetzee has come in to try and bring something similar to that sort of mobile carrying option. So I think that seems to me to be the thinking there. But I think good things might be happening in Bath. Let's keep an eye on it. We'll see where they go.
And there's nothing wrong with trying to thicken the sauce, as they say, with a few Saffa boys. So the rest of the transfer and rumor news, I'm going to hand over to you because you have a lot more insight into these guys and where they're going and where they've come from. Can you tell us a bit more about what news you've been hearing and rumors you've been seeing?
Yeah, so quick one from Montpellier is obviously that Jacques du Plessis, massive South African second rower, like all of them. He's now leaving the club at the end of the season. The feeling is that he's dead. He's coming back to the Bulls. I think it was between the Bulls and the Sharks, but the word on the street is that it's the Bulls who've won his signature. He played for the Bulls for a long time, went through all the youth structures there. It was at Tuks as well, I think. Born in KZN, but basically came through all the Bulls youth structures really and played his professional rugby there before going to Montpellier. He's played under 20s for South Africa. You know what you get with him. He's a big, strong guy. Played with Paul Willemse, in fact, at the Bulls. The Bulls' second row factory just keeps churning them out. So he'll be good to see. He'll add some ballast in the Bulls pack. Not that it necessarily needs much more, but I think that's one signing that we can expect. Johan Goosen is another one, I think, who at the end of his contract is going to make a move to the Bulls. That's sort of open secret at this point. And then the other two interesting ones at the Bulls this week, James Verity-Am, who's just been announced, I think, an hour or so ago at the time of this recording on Monday. He's going to add a little bit more to their back three in the back line. And then Opa Mahoje is the other one, which has been doing the Rumours. I think his big thing is he wants to challenge to get back into that Boks setup. And Jake White said, look, give us your all. With Tim Agaba, who's another back row player leaving there, I think that's where they want to bring in Mahoje. I think he might be more used there as a back row player rather than a lock. Another very, very talented guy. Apparently, he's not the signature is not confirmed. Negotiations are ongoing, so he might end up staying at the Cheetahs, but that's just the rumor I'm hearing at the moment.
Now, can you talk us typically through a transfer, or how a transfer works? So a player would get a call or a message from the respective parties. How long between that call and actually putting pen to paper, bearing in mind all the decisions that have to be made? Let's try and take away from the fact that there's a pandemic going on. And obviously that does, allude to some of their decisions or decision making. Typically, how does the process work for those who don't quite understand it?
Well, I think rugby has got a bit to go in terms of its professionalism when it comes to the sort of transfer contracting process. It's not the same in football. There's very clear set transfer windows when you can approach and make negotiations, and it's still done obviously through agents in a large part, and the agent will sort of link a player to a club that they think would work, and management agencies will do the same. And so in many ways it is exactly as you'd expect. As you say, it might be a player going to their agent saying, look, maybe look for me for opportunities. It doesn't seem to be working here. Or it might be a coach going to a player and saying, look, I think you should start looking for alternative opportunities. Or it might, it might well be a scout from a club coming to, let's say a scout from France comes to South Africa, sees a junior guy, gets in touch with him either directly or through an agent or through his current club, and can work. So it can work in a number of channels in which it can work. There's no set time period either. I think it sort of happens all the time. Obviously, you have set contracts for a certain amount of time, but they'll have break clauses. Players are sometimes released. There's often goodwill on behalf of clubs. So if a player isn't fitting in at a club and isn't getting game time, oftentimes we see clubs being like, no, it's okay. We'll release you from your contract early so you can go play somewhere else, which is very, very nice. Sometimes clubs there'll be some kind of transfer fee paid. We saw that with Siya Kolisi. So there's a number of ways that it happens. I think there's very difficult to give you a standardized idea of how it happens in South Africa or around the rugby world. It sort of happens. In my mind, it would be good to get to a position where a bit more like football, we can have a bit more of a standardized process, or at least a time when players move and a bit more of a protocol, not least because I think one of the most exciting things in football is that transfer window and that speculation, and it drives interest from fans, and it's a great talking point, a great discussion point. And as we always talk about, rugby is a sport looking to market itself. That's a brilliant marketing opportunity. People love buying into that narrative. You and me both, we get Munster fans all the time. I get in my messages still asking me, what's Jason Jenkins like? What do you know about him?
Yeah.
This stuff is great. So, we've talked about it, by the way, Munster fans, in the last podcast. Long story short, he's a great guy. You're very lucky to have him. Go watch the previous podcast if you want to know more. But yeah, so I genuinely think transfers is a great way to drive engagement, drive interest.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Let's finish the show with our Saffa of the week. I have a funny inclination that we're probably going to have either the same player, but why don't we start with you? Who was your Saffa of the week and why?
Well, you can't look past Raymond Rule, can you?
Not a chance. No. Yeah.
No chance. I think it's an easy pick. I was thinking, should I be a bit difficult and be like, oh, Cronje, because he nailed that really clutch conversion. Should I pick Dwebo because he added a bit of impetus? But no, it was Raymond Rule. He was fantastic. man of the match performance for La Rochelle. He's tearing it up in France. Long may it continue. Yeah, brilliant performance. I've said everything I can really say about him from this week's performance. But yeah, Raymond Rules absolutely my Saffa standout of the week.
I share your sentiments, with 2 quality tries, a bit of individual skill, one of the most versatile backs at the moment. But yeah, there's nothing else to say other than he's been on fantastic form at the moment. He's doing incredibly well over in France. And, yeah, nothing much else to say than, Raymond Rule being my Saffas standard of the week. If you guys out there agree with us or disagree with us, please let us know in the comment section below. If you're listening to this on Spotify, you can join either of our socials, jump back onto YouTube, or drop the links to all of our socials. But yeah, anything we've mentioned in today's episode, if you're with it or against it, we read and respond to all of them. So please do let us know. Once again, thank you to Bruce Jack Wine for sponsoring this video. Please drink responsibly. But yeah, always such a pleasure to have you on. I'm so lucky that you are on the show, and genuinely we love talking rugby and a lot of controversy. Wales, please don't hate us. We were just making a point. But yeah, we will keep you posted on all things Pro 14 and all that visa saga. We will try and keep you updated in the week if we see, hear, or suspect any transfer news or rumors. But yeah, my man, always a pleasure to have you. Is there anything else that you'd like to finish off with before we finish?
That's it from me. Cheers. Thanks to everyone who's watched. Thanks to everyone who comments and supports the show. Really appreciate it. I didn't ever think that I'd be that guy with a podcast, but now we are, and yeah, it's been so much fun. Long may it continue.
Yes, as you said, thank you to everybody that supports us, and we really do appreciate it. And I've been wanting to say this for the longest time, but if you do like what you see here, please like this video and subscribe to our podcast. And yeah, we'll see you guys next week. Cheers.
Cheers.